Oh, hi. Welcome back to part 2 of my History of Warhammer 40k terrain. Last time we got as far as the end of 7th edition, so join me and Mike as we continue gluing ourselves to cardboard terrain and talk about all the stuff that came out from 8th edition onwards.
Moving on to 8th edition 40k, that of course was a huge change to the rules. They didn't come, again, as far as I can recall, the scenery, the sandbox didn't come with any scenery. So that was the one that came with the Death Guard and the advent of the Primaris Marines, but there was no terrain that I can remember that came in that box.
Not that I can remember either.
Likewise, there wasn't really any immediately released terrain that came out with that. But what they did do at that point was they started doing these. Kind of came full circle, and we've completely missed, actually, we've talked about the tiles that they did, but they did also do some flocked mats at one point, which were useful. I think the green grass one was used by basically everybody. They did do some flocked yellow ones when they released Gorkamorka, specifically so you could have that desert effect. And this is kind of a precursor, I suppose, to the games mat stuff that a lot of people use now. But when 8th Ed released, they changed.
Can I just say, those green grass flock mats were great, unless you had to vacuum ever. Because actually, no, you did have to vacuum every time you used it because they shed everywhere, and it just never stopped. I would expect, you open it, you use it, you need to vacuum, fine. You do it again, you need to vacuum. But literally, I had to deal with a couple of them, and after 6 months of constant use, you still I don't know whether they just regenerate the flock on them because at some point it's going to be bald, but. Yeah,
it's like cats and shedding. You don't know where it all comes from, why you don't just have a bald cat. It just seems to constantly keep coming. Yeah, no, I think that's probably part of why Games Workshop issued such endurable Hoovers to every store. Everyone got a Henry Hoover, just because it was going to need to clear up all the excess flock that was getting scattered all over the floor during games nights. After the grass flock mites, so they changed the size of the gaming areas. So they stopped saying, okay, well, everyone's going to play on a 6x4. And they actually started saying, well, let's play on this slightly different, slightly weirder sized version of it. But to that end, they started releasing cardboard gaming mats.
I've heard stories as to why the board size changed. And I kind of believe that it's because that fits in a box.
It does fit in a box. I still use a 6x4, I've got to be honest.
Yes.
I'm a creature of habit. But I have these in case anybody ever wants to play on this slightly weird sizes.
Yeah, it makes sense for the company to adjust sizes to something that they can put in a box, as opposed to just go down to B&Q and buy a 6x4.
Yeah, she'll be reet.
Yeah. And also, to be honest, I don't really have space in my house for a 6x4.
I have my 6x4 is a rolled up mat, and then I'll have to send you pictures later. I've got 3 folding banqueting tables. Each one is 2 foot by 4 foot. So you can have a 4x4, a 6x4, or a 2x4. But in whatever arrangement you want, you've got then, and they're also adjustable in terms of height as well, but they fold away completely flat. So that's what I'm using at the moment. This is what this is on. It's on one of the 4x2s, and it's just the right size I've found for filming at. Okay, the tents are much easier to build than the spaceship. There's a tent that was instantly much easier to build than the spaceship. I'm going to build another one. So they released these cardboard board sections, and around that time they also re-released Necromunda. And with the re-release of Necromunda, we got, firstly, the first version of Necromunda came with flat Zone Mortalis tiles with, I felt a little bit cheated. There wasn't a cardboard section, folded cardboard section you could put on these to make the wall sections. You just had to use your imagination. But they quickly followed that up with a replacement, which was the 1 foot by 1 foot plastic tile, which neatly sat with, there it is, it's behind me, the plastic Zone Mortalis sections that they did, which I think are awesome. And I think, especially with the boarding terrain stuff that's come up recently, I want to try out using the boarding terrain rules, but using my Necromunda scenery. That was quickly followed by the Necromunda Fort, and this was all designed by the same designer. So it's one of these things what we were crying out for with the 40k scenery, of it being all the same scale, all modular. That's what he did with the Necromunda scenery, and even down to the Ash Waste stuff that followed it. Everything is built to the same scale, and conveniently, two of these is exactly the same height as one of... Where are you? These. So if you stack two of those up, or if you use one of the walkways, it all comes to the same size, which is eminently pleasing.
But, and I'm going to ruin it for you, the Gallow Dark scenery isn't the same size.
Oh, you are kidding me. It's not the same scale?
Pretty sure it's smaller.
Okay, if you've got some of it, please let us know in the comments. Is it the same scale or not? Because if so, I'm never buying the Gallow Dark scenery. I would just do Necromunda. I cannot make room for another scale of scenery in my life.
I saw a picture online briefly and did not investigate it more because I don't own official... Here, I did buy a 3D printer.
Yes.
There is a good reason I bought a 3D printer. Oh, I'm just destroying everything. Don't worry. For printing things like this.
That's very nice. That's very, very nice.
Including like rubble and broken, because that actually maps to one of the cardboard.
To one of these.
Yeah, I think because they did a second set. I think
they did.
I can't remember what it's called, but it was basically the Badlands. But is it Badlands?
It was an out-of-zone version. There was a second set of cardboard tiles that they released,
and it had things like ruined walls, like this.
And so you 3D printed it to fit.
I 3D printed it. Well, somebody else designed these. I got them online. And 3D printing it myself.
I can't blame them too much because the scale of these isn't the same as the scale of these. So that is not the same size. Yeah. What this is the same size as is the Forge World 3D Zone Mortalis scenery. So these, if you had the Forge World Zone Mortalis tiles, would have fit with those, which is what you've got there, basically.
That's what I've scaled these to.
Yeah, so that would be, if you would lay your hands on some official Forge World Zone Mortalis tiles, that would match.
Yes, and that's a 1 foot by 1 foot tile. Still need to get around to playing more games on it, especially with now all the boarding action rules and things like that. But yeah, that's
But so we've mentioned the boarding action thing. We'll jump forward. Boarding action, of course, is the most recent scenery that they've released for 40k. And there is a whole bunch of other 40k scenery that we need to cover before we can get to that. That is the most recent stuff, which I think is a really cool idea. It's like a natural evolution of Space Hulk, which may well get a splash release to 2 days' time. Well, a week ago when this video airs, but in 2 days from now when we're filming it, there is the preview from Adepticon, and a lot of people are saying Space Hulk. A lot of people are saying that there's a new edition of Space Hulk coming, which will make use of the Gallowdank scenery, but it'll use it in the traditional Space Hulk tiles format. I have no idea if that's true. I'm excited to wait and find out. By the time we release this video, we'll all know the answer, I think.
Yeah, I saw today, which of course is, as you say, before the release, that the Warhammer40,000.com website is being updated.
Ooh, okay.
So, instead of Space Hulk, which I would quite like Space Hulk, it may be that 10th edition is coming around.
That is also eminently possible. I think the only reason a lot of people are saying Space Hulk is the Warhammer, and this may be a huge fake out. Maybe this is a double blind to try and fake out the rumor websites. But the picture that they've released of one was the Tyranid with a Terminator in its eye and the Terminator with a Tyranid in its eye. The second one, they went, "Who can stop this Hulk? In space, no one can defeat him." Now, they could just be messing with us. And if so, well played. I will give it well played, Warcom team, if that is a fake out. But I am leaning towards a new edition of Space Hulk. We'll see in 2 days' time. I mean, yeah, maybe it's 10th edition and Space Hulk. That would be even more awesome. And maybe it's new Terminator models that will be released alongside 10th edition. Who knows?
All those old Blood Angels Terminators from Space Hulk that you cannot get for love nor money.
Right, I'm going to try building another tent. These tents are going together quite well, actually. We should talk about, so when 8th edition really came out, like we said, there wasn't any terrain that came in the box, but there was a lot of terrain that came out shortly thereafter. So when they released 8th edition, they released the new kind of Death Guard models, and the Death Guard got their own kind of plague scenery, essentially. So much like they'd started doing unique army scenery for the different armies in Fantasy, or Age of Sigmar as it was by that point. For 40k, they started doing unique scenery pieces. So, for example, there was a plague furnace that pumped out kind of clouds of toxic gas for the Death Guard. For the Gene Stealer cult, there was the kind of massive breaching drill, which they
tectonic frag drill.
The tectonic frag is an awesome name for a weird choice. We are an infiltrating mining force. You're a mining force? Well, clearly what you need is a massive mining drill that causes earthquakes. Yeah, why not?
Was it used for infiltrating?
No, not really. No, it just you had it on the board as far as I can tell, and it made humongous earthquakes occur.
Subtle, yes, guys.
Sneaky. The Eldar got one of the coolest ones. I don't have this, but it's still available. It's the Eldar Waygate model, and I love this model. It's really kind of graceful, and it's nice to see the Eldar get a bit of love. And I mean, even down to I've looked at it before, and I wondered if I can repurpose it for like some high elf scenery or something, because it does look like it belongs in some kind of elven fantasy realm.
I played against one at Silent War.
Yes, Aaron brought one, didn't he, alongside his Eldar army? How was it?
Really annoying.
Like you'd expect from Eldar, to be honest.
Well, I was playing Guard, and having an Eldar army appear closer to me than like artillery range is always going to be annoying. So yeah, lovely bit of kit.
The Orcs got the Mech Boy Workshop, which made your vehicles faster, or might add the reroll shots. I'm not entirely clear what it did. I don't have one with my Orcs because my Orcs tend to just drive up and crump things rather than worrying about what the Mech Boy is up to.
I think the Mech Boy Workshop's gone through several iterations of rules, and they've varied between ridiculous and rubbish. Because I think at one point you could rearm single-use weapons.
Okay.
Which it's like, how many single-use weapons are there? Oh, the Stomper.
The Stomper just stands next to it, and the mechs quickly winches some more rockets into the Super Shooter or something.
The Super Gatler that you fire once a game because it then runs out of ammo. Oh, hang on.
I'll just reload that.
Yeah.
Tent village. One more tent to build. I'm trying to think what other armies got terrain. The Dark Eldar, did they get any? No, the Dark Eldar didn't get anything. They never get any love. Dark Eldar didn't get anything.
They're lucky to get models.
They are lucky to get models. Did the Tyranids get anything? I mean, they got the Gene Cult did, but the Tyranids I don't think did.
The Tyranids used to get, I'm not sure if they probably still do, because again, they don't get models. Get the little brood spore things to stick onto like base.
Yeah, that was the what's called the spore mine, not spore mine.
It was just little tentacle moored things.
Well, there was the drop pod version of the Tyranids. I can't think what it's called. The Mucilid Spore. The Mucilid Spore.
Oh yes.
Off that. Never mind. But it looks right like that. The Mucilid Spore could be built in a terrain form. So there was a like a stationary spawning pit or something that they got that the Mucilid Spore could be used as. But yeah, I don't know anybody who ever did. If they ever took a Mucilid Spore, it was just a nice way of deploying an angry Carnifex behind your lines.
But and also they were huge.
They were. Well, still are. You can still get them.
It was deep. You can't deep strike within 9 inches. It's like
good luck getting it on the board.
Yeah, who's leaving like a 24-inch hole in their back lines?
Yes.
Really. And then the Trigon just comes up from underneath anyway.
Exactly, and then you just pour all your stuff out of the hole it's just dug in the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are all the unique army kind of terrain bits that I can think of that they released at around that time. The other thing that they did was that Kill Team came out by then, and Kill Team has come with some consistently brilliant terrain ever since. So I've got one of the bits of Kill Team terrain down here. Was the ruined orc fort stuff, and I confess, I've filed the Orky symbols off mine because my intention is to paint it up as kind of Necromunda Scrap Town scenery for my Necromunda board. But yeah, the nice thing about these was you got essentially 4 kind of cornered buildings, but they would slot together to make one big building. I think that's a really nice piece of design work by the Games Workshop design crew. But then the rest of the Kill Team stuff they've done, some of it was just re-releasing the updated City Fight terrain that they did. So they replaced the previous City Fight terrain that we've already shown you with some new City Fight terrain that was built to the same scale as the Necromunda scenery. So it was built to fit the stuff that came with Shadow War Armageddon, which just, again, even more infuriates because it means that I haven't bought any of that, because if you had a City Fight board and you had existing City Fight terrain, you got a second set of scenery that didn't match the scale of the other stuff. Calm. Yeah.
Is that the modular stuff or the non-modular?
It was semi-modular. So it built Administratum building, or it built Basilica Part 1, Basilica Part 2.
Yeah.
But you could mix and match some of it together.
Yeah, I think
it came with those giant statues on the outside as well.
Ah, yes, that one.
And actually, mentioning giant statues, we've missed the giant Space Marine statue that they did. There was the Honoured Imperium kit they did. I think this was around about 5th edition 40k, which came with a broken Aquila, a statue of a giant Space Marine, and something else. I don't know what the third bit was.
I got the feeling there is something else, but honestly, can't remember what it is either.
I can't remember what it is either. I'll throw up a picture, and then I'll be able to go, oh, that's what it was. But so, yeah, that was something that existed. There really is. There's a lot more, compared to the scenery that I went through in my fantasy video, there was a lot more scenery that has been produced for 40k over the years. They also released the alien trees. Now, you'd made mention of the aquarium plant alien trees, but there was also the Death World jungle alien trees that were just these weird, random spiky bits that looked a little bit like some of the stuff that features in The Last of Us, I suppose. These were kind of fungus bloom type spiky plants that came with, for reasons best known to Games Workshop, some ruined Eldar scenery as well, presumably because it was supposed to be like an Eldar Exodite world or something. Not even Maiden World, because it was Death World series, like Exodite World stuff. Yeah. But yeah, there was something that had been released, I think, during kind of 7th Ed. They released that. But so where we're at now, we've got Kill Team cranking out some stonking scenery all the time. They've re-released some of the previously existing scenery as part of that, but they've also released the new version of the kind of the landing pad, the big Imperium base with walls and the radar dish and all of those bits, and some of the most recent Kill Team scenery that they've released.
Missed out a couple of things that I realised.
What have we missed?
We've missed out the amazing Munitorium armoured containers.
Yes!
And the little buggies to drive around and move those around. And
the galvanic servo hauler.
That's the one.
Or the heresy train, as some people call it. Thomas the Tank Engine's grimdark cousin.
Yeah. Because those armoured containers, I have far more than I need, because I subscribe to the Imperium magazine.
Yeah.
And apparently they're like, you need 9 of these. And I'm like, cool.
What should we put in this issue? We don't know what to put in this issue. Just put another armoured container in there. Who cares?
Yeah, I might have 9. I've got loads. I've got more than I need, especially when you have any other scenery.
That's my
but they are decent as just big, easy to put somewhere.
Line of sight blocking. Yeah.
Scenery. And they stack nicely as well. So you can actually, if you've got more than you need, you can build a wall with a Leman Rust behind. Or, in fact, a Bane Blade.
Or build walls in Necromunda, which is what I've seen some people do. You literally stack them up, and they'll rack up quite nicely, because they are, again, much like these walls here. 2 of them, container on container. 1 container is exactly the same height as this.
Yeah.
2 containers is exactly the same height as the Zone Mechanicum scenery, which is a really nice touch. But yeah, I've seen people in Necromunda who've just essentially bulked out the walls of their Zone Natalis section by just stacking armoured containers. And you're right, there was a whole bunch of other bits. They did the Promethean pipes, which you got in the Imperium magazine, and that they get quite a few of those away, because they're, what are we going to throw in here? Well, let's throw one of those in there. And the Hemotrope reactor, which has to be one of the most grimdark craziness things that they produce. The idea of a huge reactor that runs on blood. Because why not? Because blood is famously flammable, apparently.
See,
Yeah.
It just. Well, the hematruck reactor is this thing that runs on blood, but it hooks up to your promethium pipes.
Yes. I honestly think
they're not the same thing.
I think they must have been just one of those things of the tech priests go, well, this clearly needs this works better after Jim bled in it. Clearly the machine spirits want blood, right? Every reactor from now on has to have blood into the mix. It won't work unless there's blood in there.
Yeah. It was weird,
but evidently 40k, and again a funky piece of kit which I've got a couple of those which I used together with one of the large round barrel section bits of scenery that they produced as part of the Zone Mechanicus scenery, and conveniently the hematite reactor with a little bit of snipping fits nicely onto the end section of this. So I've got two of them. I'll throw a picture up on there. I'll throw them into the group in a minute. Of one on either end with a barrel in between to make a giant generator turbine, which is quite cool.
And it's got a giant skull on both ends at that point. So
yeah, well, I think I put a skull on one end, and I then hid the skull inside the generator on the other end of mine. But you could just as easily put a giant skull on each end, because why not? Everything works better with skulls on it and blood inside it, apparently.
Yeah.
Right, I think that is everything off that cardboard sprue, so that can go over there. Take these tokens out of this sprue.
So somebody, I've just, with the assembling this, I'm trying to not so subtly read the instructions as we go along. And somebody obviously decided to write these instructions without actually assembling this themselves. Because I'm just getting very confused by taking the complete boxy bit and position it against the left-hand side of the main hull, 4A, so at least I know which piece that is.
Yep.
On the underside of the hull, there is a small black mark. Well, most of the underside is black because it's a crashed spaceship.
Yeah,
There's a couple of small
black
white marks, which I'm like, are those meant to be the small black marks? Because somebody built this before it was printed.
Oh dear.
I'm hoping it's the small white mark because, well, I'll glue it together and we'll find out. But
I have built all that I can build because I have misplaced one of the cardboard sprues. I know I've got it, but I think it may have left it in storage. So I've built all I can build. But I built a little shanty village, at least, which I feel vaguely good about, and this engine bit, which is clearly, the centre of their shanty village. Watch now as you finish building your... Try and finish building your engine section.
Yeah. That bit, at least, I'm pretty happy with, goes along here.
I think we are mostly up to date in terms of 40k that scenery that's come out so far. So obviously there's the Gallowdank scenery that is the most recent scenery, and there's the most recent kind of bits. Oh no, I know we forgot to mention the Zone Fronteris and the kind of ruined wall sections that they did then, which nicely kind of replicate the stuff that we got all the way back in the second edition 40k kit.
That the what became Moonbase.
That's the one.
Or whatever.
That's the one. Yeah. So there was a complete. There was a complete building that it made, which I've built mine of, and it's going to feature at some point as Glazer's Creek in my Battle at Glazer's Creek refight. But then there was ruined versions of the walls, and what was quite nice was it had two sections that slotted together like that. Those bits, yes, those bits.
And I really like them. They do they slot together nice and solidly.
But they stand sturdily when they're on the board. Yeah,
and they're big enough that you can actually get some like something hiding behind them.
Yeah.
Without being 6 inches tall.
We should.
Then they've stopped doing them.
Have they actually physically stopped doing those now?
I don't know if they have. They certainly. So.
I'm gonna quick check now.
Certainly, last time I missed the Moonbase box, which was frustrating because I was like, "That's really good," because I don't actually have any of the cardboard game tiles. I was like, cool. And then I went in to get it, and obviously left it slightly too long. And they're like, "Yeah, we don't stock that anymore." I'm like,
I missed it when the first time round, and I grabbed it the second time it came round, which is what I can say. I've built that to be my Glazer's Creek farmhouse. Just a quick so. Battle Zone Fronteris now is the one that you can still get the Hab bunker. Yeah, so the building you can get
the solid buildings. I just don't think you can get the ruins anymore.
Let's have a look. no, they've got the Sector Imperialis ruins instead, which don't do the same thing. They're not slot together like that.
Yeah.
We have completely glossed over. We mentioned the series that they did for the other ones. We've completely failed to mention the stuff for the Tau Shield Wall, which is their version of the trench line. The Tau Shield Wall, which is quite cool because that could actually move as well. It was useful scenery that could move and float around the board with a line of Tau Fire Warriors. Essentially, it was like a transport more than it was a static scenery piece. But also then they did for Chaos, here we go, they did the Noctilith Crown, which, let's be honest, it's a corpse grinder for Necromunda piece of scenery that happens to be stood on its edge, looking like a Stargate. It is very
I was going to say, is that the one that looks like a Stargate?
Yes, it's the one that looks exactly like a Stargate, but I think it's far better used if you lay it on its side and then just put a big grinding thing inside it, and it's the corpse grinder terrain for Necromunda. But yeah, since then they've also released the Necron scenery, those big pylons for Necrons, and it's probably worth just doing a shout out to some of the Forge World scenery that's been done over the years.
Yes.
Forge World did, as well as obviously the Zone Mortalis scenery, which is well worthy of a mention. They did some incredible resin scenery over the years. I mean, you can't not mention the Imperial Fortress. So this is over £1,000 worth of resin, and that's over 20 years ago. It was over £1,000 worth of resin, but it was a full size, over a foot tall wall, ruined resin fortress, which I obviously never owned myself, but you could play on it when they had one at Warhammer World for a while, one of the scenic tables at Warhammer World. And 10 years ago, when it was my 30th, I ran a 40k event up there, and we played a big siege game on that, which their board had a section where they basically smashed part of it with a hammer to make a ruined breach in the wall. And we had essentially a forlorn hope trying to pour through the gap in the wall while the defenders poured fire down onto and launched sallies out through the gate. Awesome piece of scenery. But they also did just some generic city fight scenery. So they did their own city fight tiles at one point, which were exactly the same size as the ones that I've got here, the 2 foot by 2 foot tiles, but they were more sculpted, so they weren't flat. They were raised up, and you had sections that were built to match the size of the resin city fight scenery that Forge World were doing. So they did
a big power generator.
They did a big power generator. They did a big, like a sanctuary, essentially, and a bit part of a ruined Imperial chapel that was built to fit on the tile that they had scaled it to. They did, the trench line. They did a board. Well, the idea was it was a resin trench system, but you needed to build your own board out of the insulation foam and then carve gaps in it, which you could slot your trench sections into. Yeah. That was something that was clearly marketed at somebody who has their own dedicated gaming room, which they could afford to just build a massive 6-foot trench board into. They built the Anthelion project, which was a whole space base with, it was straight out of Hadley's Hope from Aliens. It was a complex with, test tube sections with essentially plastic pipes that you had resin inserts that you would put a gene stealer or a Tyranid inside this plastic pipe and then pour in liquid resin to represent kind of the fluid that it was built in. Oh God!
They did more of the 2 foot by 2 foot realm on battle tiles, because they did what was effectively like a Space Marine or Imperial depot.
Yes,
had turrets on the corners and a big marshalling yard in the middle.
They did, they did the one that was the Space Marine Redoubt that had essentially I think it was built for the Heresy game. That one, that was the one that was scaled as if it would have like a Thunderhawk landing pad in the middle. But then there was a bunker section at the back, and there was raised up sections for sentry guns and stuff around it.
Yeah,
they did some awesome desert scenery. They did essentially bits that were just doorways, and then the idea was that you built a resin, almost like a Hobbit hole style mound out of foam, set the doorway in it, covered it in sand, and it looked like an entrance to an underground bunker on a desert planet. That was for the Taros campaign. They released that. Just thinking about they did brass etched barbed wire. I remember that. So if you wanted to decorate your trench line, it was razor sharp. It was literally, it was like tiny little bits of razor wire that you then wrapped around a pencil and put on the board.
You know what we can do? We can make really
Let's make razor wire.
Games Workshop had released barbed wire at one point.
Yes, I've got some of it, and that was a single length of wire with another length of wire wrapped around the outside of it. So it looked like barbed wire, but it wasn't actually sharp.
yeah, it was just fine. Then Forge World went, you know what, we can make it more accurate. We can make literal barbed wire.
The Hold My Beer version of Games Workshop.
It's just like, that was a great idea, really accurate. Can you move it? No. Can't touch that.
Some of the stuff they created as well, like the ruined Titan tile sections, or the crashed Thunderhawk that they did. Just mental, amazing scenery, but mental. And it was that stuff, I think it was marketed at people who go, you know what, I've got more disposable income than I know what to do with. I want the most awesome 40k board ever, and I'm willing to pay for it. So, okay, let's finish this out then, talking about great moments from 40k scenery. Standout pieces of scenery that's been produced over the years. It's appeared either in codices or the pages of White Dwarf. I think we have to mention, first of all, and I know you've got it hopefully standing by, lurking somewhere in the background, there was a piece...
I will get you a photo that you can throw up.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm just expecting you to lift it up and show it to everybody.
It's holding my Blood Angels up in the display cabinet.
Fine. We'll go for a photo.
Might give it away a little bit.
Yeah. But, there was a period in time during which White Dwarf, every single issue almost, seemed to feature a large shrine. Certainly the battle at Sanctuary 101 that appeared in White Dwarf 218, the shrine that they were fighting over was this particular shrine. And essentially it was this large arch set of windows with a balcony bit behind the back that was perfectly scaled for displaying miniatures. And this lunatic went and built it.
Yeah. This stems from, as I mentioned at the start, second edition was when I got into 40k, and I have done the crazy thing of building a second edition Blood Angels army, because I never had one and I wanted one. So I was like, you know what? I dug through my models and I found some of the plastic second edition starter Marines, and I'm like, I'm going to paint them up as Blood Angels to go with the box. It will be excellent. And then I'm like, I've got 2 squads of those. I might as well get more people. And I had the limited edition Games Day Blood Angels captain from that artwork.
The one with the fist like that.
Yeah. And I was like, you know, okay, I have to do him up. And then it kind of went into a whole army. I actually have a Rhino in the post at the moment coming, so that I can paint it bright red, because that's one of the few things I'm missing from it. And it's
do you have a Predator?
I don't have a Predator.
Would you like one?
Of course.
I have. Literally, it's painted bright blue, and you may want to give it like several washes in Biostrip. But I have a second edition Predator, the one with the autocannon turret and the 2 big boxy las cannon sides, not the metal one, the all plastic one that they released in second edition. Yeah, so if you want it, I'll post it to you.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll
that will go bright red and fill in.
Awesome.
With it, because I ended up basing it on the. There was a Blood Angels army box set.
I remember it.
Which from second edition, and I was like, I'll build that army. And the display picture of that army has a hill at one side and this piece of terrain at the other side. And I'm like, if I'm building all of that, I've got to build the scenery so that I can have that army
on that scenery
display cabinet on that scenery. So I looked at it and I'm like, okay, how do I build those arches? As I mentioned, I've got a 3D printer. So I did the crazy thing of trying to learn how to design 3D models to build that piece of scenery. Fortunately, it's quite boxy, so it's not as bad. It's not perfect. It's a nice bit of scenery. I didn't find enough photos 360 degrees of it to give me a really good view of all around it. But it's certainly good enough to be used gaming and for display purposes.
So looking cool in the cabinet, at least.
Yes. Yeah. The model's actually on Tinkercad, which is the website I use to design everything, because I haven't bought any actual 3D building software. And I'm pretty sure I've made it public. I will grab a link and you can throw it in the description.
I'll put it in the description below. Fantastic.
If people want to print their own ones, feel free. If people want to grab that and adjust it and make it better, feel free to do so. Please do let me know so that I can get a more accurate one.
That's awesome, dude.
So yeah, that's what I've done. With
the other piece of 3D printing you're working on at the moment is, we haven't mentioned, and this is the deliberate omission, when they were doing cardstock scenery, there was one 40k campaign pack. So much like Fantasy got like 5 or 6, 5 we worked out in the last video, 5 campaign packs, all with funky cardboard scenery. 40k only got one campaign pack,
But
which
it was
an awesome Storm of Vengeance. I mean, whereas the other ones had 4 games in each, scenario pack, it had 10. Storm of Vengeance was the entirety of the Pacina 4 campaign, the battle between Ghazghkull and the Dark Angels, and it came with an entire cardboard power generator. And because we want to refight some of the games from Storm of Vengeance using the more up-to-date Dark Angel stuff and some of the up-to-date Orky stuff, you are going to 3D print, aren't you, the power generator from Storm of Vengeance?
Yes. Yeah. So I've got the cardboard scanned. So some nice person who has a copy of the cardboard has scanned it into the computer and put it on the internet. And I have Necromunda bulkheads. So I could print that out and build it. But I've got a 3D printer there. And I did have it back in the day. And when you've got a squad of metal marines on what is primarily cardboard, especially some of the walkways on it.
Bouncy.
Well, yeah, and some of the walkways, there's literally like a Y-shaped walkway that's held up by a bulkhead at either end. And
nothing in between, just air.
It's like, don't really want to be putting nice metal models on there. So I was like, I'm going to have a go and see what I can do and how much I can push my 3D skills to develop them, because it's fun. I've found another hobby. So yeah, that is a work in progress at the moment. I've sent you a photo that you can throw
I'm
up.
going to throw that up now.
The garish colours. Yeah.
Before it gets painted. Or we can just play on it in those colours.
Well, that's the design. It will be printed in whatever colour filament I happen to have. And then spray painted, so it's not shiny plastic. When I work out how to also cut it up, because it's far bigger than my 3D printer is, so it'll be cut up into pieces and then printed and then glued all back together. But yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. The final bit of terrain I think I wanted to mention was, and this is something that featured in the How to Build Wargames Terrain book that they released around the time of 2nd and 3rd edition 40k. And it was a board that they actually did an article in White Dwarf showing how they built it. This was the wrecked spaceship board. And I still maintain this is one of the coolest boards that they ever built for White Dwarf or for Games Workshop. It used all manner of government. It used like a spaceship from Star Wars. It used one of the Rebel cruisers to make like the huge mid-section cargo section that looks like something out of Thunderbird 2. But they filled the interior detail. They added all manner of battle damage to it. They built an escape pod out of the ever-present in 40k toilet ballcock sections, but then they added stuff like they added a door cut to the side with hatches. I'm going to just keep throwing some pictures up here as I'm talking, with stuff like a skeleton that's burned and blackened crawling out of the escape pod, showing that there was no escape from this crashing spaceship. The midsection had gantry levels in it with Tyranids crawling all over it. There was an entire leg stanchion that they built out of PVC pipe and stuff. It was an incredible board, and there was a whole bunch of battle reports during kind of the run up to Paul Sawyer's time as editor and then beyond that it was used for. And I maintain it remains, for me, one of my all-time favourite pieces of Warhammer 40k terrain. Even if it wasn't one they sold, it was one that they showed you how you could make it yourself. And yeah, I think it's very, very cool.
Yeah, I think that's something that's almost missing now from the 40k terrain. It used to be, yes, you could buy the terrain, but you could just as happily build the terrain and have a good game and everything. And it's become, because I think it's partially because it's become so much more building oriented.
Yeah,
like you need ruins to block line of sight and this sort of that. It's
ruins have rules within the main rule book. There are specific distinctions on what that ruin is and what the rules determine you can and can't do with that particular piece of scenery.
Yeah, you can't just go down B&Q and look down the plumbing aisle and
Yep.
go, you know what, I'll grab a load of that. I'll grab some polyfiller.
Put it in a box with some glue and polyfiller, shake it, and then put it on the table and spray paint it with texture paint.
Still remember making gaming tables where we buy a big tub of polyfiller, bag of sand, and bottle of PVA glue, mix them all together and make glue, which was like bulletproof when it dried.
Yep.
And made
the boards weigh a ton.
Yeah, they weren't moving. But I think there's less of that now with the ruins having specific things, stuff like that. I still think building your own stuff's great. Building old cardboard.
I was going to say, so let's see. You've actually managed to finish building the spaceship. I've managed to build the village. I'm going to find my missing sheet of cardboard. I think it's probably in the Gorka Morka box still.
I have glued this in the wrong place.
It looks awesome though.
It's basically meant to be about 2 inches further in, but it's fine.
We will have to get a game at some point, and we can play it with the ruined spaceship on it.
Yes, I need to make a base for it. I think
That's pretty cool.
Desert coloured board.
Desert coloured board, yeah. For Gorka Walker, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining me for this, Mike. I hope you've enjoyed this wander through the ages of 40k terrain, and our somewhat my ham-fisted, his less ham-fisted approach to building this cardboard scenery. For everybody who told me to use super glue when building this, yes, okay, you were right. But
you were right until you glue something in the wrong place.
I
don't know if anybody spotted me with my craft knife and then hobby saw trying to get that part. It's done.
It lives there now. That's its home.
It lives there, so I'm gluing the spare girders you get, where it's like, you can glue them wherever you want. I'm like, try and blend it in.
Oh, is that what those are for? I haven't read the instructions. I thought they were bits of scrap that you could use in your games of Gorka Walker.
No,
scrap.
It's for gluing on wherever you want to put girders and have more detail.
Artistic interpretation.
So I've done it to try and fill this gap here to make it look like it was meant to be there and not
just as planned.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, join me and Mike in our next Tale of Four Gamers. Mike, we'll be back in our next Tale of Four Gamers video. In the meantime, there's going to be yet more wandering through the dark ages of Warhammer scenery and the history of war games to come. In the meantime, though, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching, and we will catch you next time. Bye for now.